As far as I could tell from my research, you made your first film when you were about 12. How did you get the part? How did you actually get into film?
We were doing a benefit for the Motion Picture Relief Fund. Bob Hope was on the bill, and that was at the Biltmore Hotel, as far as I can recall. And there was a gentleman by the name of Artie Jacobs, Artie Jacobs was in the audience, and he saw me. And 2 weeks later, he called my mother, talked to her. I went over and auditioned for the thing, and I got the part for Sing You Sinners.
Not for Melody for Two, wasn't that the first?
Now, Melody for Two was a picture that I made with my brothers. We did our act in that, part of our act, the hand balancing and all of that, and a couple of dance steps. But that was taken out of the picture. That was left on the cutting room floor.
Oh, I see.
So that's why I don't say that, that was my first picture. Actually, it was, and I made another picture, and I can't remember the name of that, with my two brothers and my niece again. And I know Ralph Bellamy was in the picture, but I can't remember the title. Something like You Can't Have Everything, or You Can't Take It With You. Something like You Can't Have Everything, something like that nature. But Sing You Sinners was the big picture that I made. It was really, like most of my career, it's been by accident rather than by design. When Artie saw me, then I always credited with Artie for discovering me, and it was only until 6 years ago that he finally confessed to me it wasn't he that brought me before Wesley Ruggles, who was the producer. It was his wife, because he was drinking that night, and he was tired, and he fell asleep during our act. So his wife is the one who really discovered me.
And you were in the family variety act. Did you have any thoughts of going into films? Presumably not. Yeah.
Not really. The only, well, I think I did at one particular time when Judy Garland went into pictures. And I was invited over to her house, and I met some of her Hollywood friends. That's when I felt, it'd be fun to be in pictures. I felt it more of a game than actually as a career.
Just how did the studio treat child actors and actresses under contract?
I'll just try to pinpoint it for you, because it's a pretty involved question. There's so many things that are involved with that question. I'll tell you why. The studios treated you fine, but at the same time, in growing up, it was not the most healthy thing. It was not healthy as far as growing up, maturing. Because if you were successful, the more the studio kept you as a child, the more they could control you. And I experienced that along with a lot of other people like Judy and Mickey and the rest of them. And that's where you find some of them really are flip cases and some aren't. But on the whole, as far as being nice to you, yes, they bend over backwards, but they give you the candy for the wrong reasons. So consequently, it's not healthy as a child growing up in the business in that respect.
Because really, it's the first time I've ever thought it, because it's the first time somebody's crystallized the obvious fact that they wanted to keep you young. But therefore, if they sent you to school to educate you, that in a sense could have been almost a mockery, because they wanted you to stay innocent, ignorant, and naive anyway, one presumes.
Right. Well, that's the thing that was most difficult, because of educating you to take your own place in life, and then at the same time taking it away from you. You go back to the seduction and rejection of it.
What was it like working on Sing Your Sinners with Crosby? Because obviously you were very new.
Well, working with Bing was marvelous. I was working with my brothers, and they took the place of my brothers, Fred MacMurray and Bing Crosby. And it was wonderful working with him. I had seen his pictures from when we worked on the bill with him in Vaudeville. He'd have a movie on, and I'd watch it in between shows. And it was a lot of fun. It was like a game time with me, but at the same time, it was not too unlike working with my brothers. And we got along beautifully, but it was very strange. Later on, when I made the film with him, Anything Goes, the remake of Anything Goes, relating to him as a pal, rather than a brother figure. It was kind of strange for me to get with him on that level. Of course, we made Sing Your Sinners in 38, and 38, 48, that's 58, that's 20 years later. It was kind of hard for me to look at him that way.
In Sing Your Sinners, were you really playing yourself, or did you have to learn to become an actor and play a part?
I played more myself, I would say. I was pretty rotten too. I didn't like myself on the screen. I was particularly disturbed with my voice. I always thought I had a lower voice. And to add insult to injury, Bing Crosby and his cutter, Alma, they gave me a watch that said "To Minnie with love," referring to Minnie Mouse, because of my squeaky voice. But I was really disturbed when I saw myself on the screen. I thought I was taller. They have mirrors, you know, and I don't know what I was thinking of, but I had my own thoughts about myself, and I was really disturbed, mostly about my voice. Having that real high, squeaky voice.
Was Crosby the sort of person, because he was very big in films then, was he the sort of person who would help you? One reads that you never act alongside children and animals, and I just wonder if he just let everybody else get on with their work, or whether because he was working with somebody who's young, he was of any help.
Well, I think Bing genuinely, he really likes people. Bing does. He has his reservations, of course, like everyone. But I really, truly think he likes youngsters. He likes the young people. And with me, he knew I was a pro. I came from a vaudeville circus family, and wasn't like taking somebody. Well, that may be wrong to say, but anyway, you see that he made some of his most successful films with younger people. Pennies from Heaven, Sing You Sinners with me, and quite a few others, and on the religious theme. So it kind of shows what kind of a man he is by the films that he made. He was very, very nice to me, particularly when I had to ride that crazy horse in Sing You Sinners, this racehorse. And I was very nervous of this thing. I did a lot of stunts on the horse. I never did get used to the animal. We did one take. It was about 49 or 50 takes in this one scene, which was very embarrassing because they used to call me One Take O'Connor. And I was just nervous of the horse, and I couldn't remember my lines. It just distracted me, and he was so patient.
On Your Toes, do you remember very much about it? I mean, you'd been a dancer, you were a dancer. Did the Slaughter on 10th Avenue ballet mean anything to you at the age when you were on Your Toes?
No. Well, I can now, the difference between Kelly doing it with Vera Ellen and doing it On Your Toes, it was done like the play. And naturally, it's you can't do a motion picture dance live. It's impossible. It's just too strenuous. You have to go in cuts. So they designed the dance, Slaughter on 10th Avenue. Eddie Albert did it as the stage play. And it was used primarily to get away from the cops, if you recall. Now, Kelly went and embellished the whole thing, which was magnificent, absolutely fantastic. And I immediately fell in love with Vera Ellen. But at that particular time, no, it didn't impress me. No, it didn't. It looked like another dance routine.
Yeah.
And it was a period, I mean, not a period piece, but just for what it was, stage dance.
What was the point at which you first sang in a film? Because that I couldn't track down anywhere. Can you remember when you first sang?
Yes, and that picture I can't remember, actually the first one I ever made.
Oh, you did? You sang in the very beginning one, yeah.
I started off singing, and my brothers joined me and my niece, and we started doing a dance.
Yeah.
That's the one with Ralph Bellamy. And I started singing, and the crazy thing, I just thought of it the other day when I was working. And I choreographed my first dance routine in Sing You Sinners. Wesley Ruggles came to me, and he said, "Can you put together a couple of steps?" And I said, "Yeah." So I put together a couple of steps. I didn't bring in anybody, and I just remembered it the other day. Isn't that crazy? But I started singing in that one, and I've been singing ever since.
Somewhere I read, I'm not sure at what stage it was in your career, that you had a 5-year contract. I think it was the one with Universal. And I just read something which made me sit up. It had to be okayed by the Hollywood Superior Court. What was that about? Was it for minors? I mean, why did studio contracts have to be okayed by courts, if indeed it's true? I mean, it may just not be true.
Well, I think because of the Gary Society. Remember with Jackie Coogan, he had that big suit at that time against his parents. because they apparently took all the money or half of it or something. I don't know what it was. But he had to go to court in order to get his money back, and then it became law, the Coogan law, after that. So 50%, if you were under 21 years of age, 50% had to go into trust, and 50% went to you. That's how that worked.
And you had to go to court, or
yes,
you had to go to court.
Right.
Yeah.
And that went into trust until I was 21. And I blew it when I was 21. On my parents would have gotten it anyway.
After On Your Toes, sort of then what happened? Because you went back to the family act again.
Yeah, that was the last picture I made, On Your Toes. I played Eddie Albert as a boy. And it's kind of strange looking at Eddie today. He looks so marvelous. And I'm thinking I played him as a kid, because I'm 50 now, and it's pretty incredible. I said, I played you as a boy. He goes crazy. He goes, hey, again, I go off on tangents.
Well, it doesn't matter. Now let's pursue that, because that really was a biopic, wasn't it? That was a biographical, loosely biographical film, yeah?
Well, it was Vera Zorina and Eddie. It was, in a way, because I played Eddie as a boy and another young lady, and I can't remember her name, who played Vera Zorina as a little girl. Mm-hmm. But we had that love relationship going as kids, and then that lasted throughout the picture. Yeah.
Anyway, coming off that, what happened after On Your Toes? Offers just dried up?
See, what happened was, I've had so many comebacks, I feel like I'm a yo-yo. I've bounced back so many times. I'm on I think my 6th comeback right now. When I was a kid, as I said before, it was my last picture, I started to grow. And at that time, there was still a little bit of vaudeville around the country. I went back into vaudeville with my family, and now they were supposed to go to Australia, and then I was going to go back with my mother to Hollywood to resume my career. And during that period, my brother Billy died, who was really the great comedian and singer, dancer, actor in the family. He truly was the most magnificent of all of us. And he died when he was 26, and I took his place in the act, and I stayed with them till my niece Patty went into a show called Panama Hattie with Ethel Merman. And that left my brother Jack and myself to do the O'Connor family, which was kind of ludicrous, seeing 2 guys do a family act. Silly. And so when I went through that awkward stage, and after Patty finished with Panama Hattie, we went out and did a couple of vaudeville dates, one in which was a theater in Chicago. And we received a wire to go back to Hollywood to make a picture of me to do What's Cooking with Peggy Ryan and the Jivin' Jacks and Jills. So I went out there, and I stayed there for something like 17 years.
Was that the Universal contract?
Yes.
You signed for 5 years with Universal?
Right. And then I had another comeback because those early pictures made so much money with Peggy and Gloria Jean and the Jivin' Jacks and Jills. I went into service, and there I made 12 pictures. When I was a kid, I made 13 because I was growing up. Didn't want to get in all the pictures before I got too tall. Then the other one, I made 12 pictures with Peggy and Gloria Jean. And I went into service. Then when I got out of service, Universal had merged with International, and they didn't know what to do with me. So again, I waited around, and I started making some pictures because I went to England, and I played at Palladium, and I went to Birmingham, Liverpool, and Glasgow, and played around the States, and I was making so much money, and the attendance was so good, they finally noticed me, and I started another comeback. So you see what I mean by being like a yo. I've been going up and down. And the cycles, too, like the Francis series came along, that also helped. The television helped. When I did Texaco and Colgate and things like that.
Before you went to war personally, which was sort of to the end of the war, wasn't it? You were of age, and then you went off to war. Hollywood had gone to war anyway, hadn't they? Because some of the films you were making, Private Buckaroo and...
That's right.
And films was that Hollywood's... What was that? Hollywood's war effort? Johnny Comes Marching Home and sort of things like that. What were they about?
Well, really, they were about the same theme. If we did a picture like... well, there's one picture where we worked in a factory manufacturing airplanes or something, building airplanes. Then you get a big pennant, either V for victor or E for effort or something like that. That is what the pictures were about, intermingled with dance numbers and songs. The dialogue was always the same. Hello, how are you? Fine, let's do a dance. And we do it, off we go.
But what was the primary audience? Was it meant as...
And there were escape movies,
to be sent to the troops, or
Oh,
for
yeah.
the people that were left behind? Or...
Well, both. They did serve a purpose. Here, there were light, frothy things that had really no purpose other than energy. They created a tremendous amount of energy and escape. And those low-budget pictures I made with Peggy and Gloria, my God, they were fantastic for the troops all over the world. Incredible what they did for their morale. I would see them over and over again. And a lot of, and I knew millions and millions of soldiers in my time, and they'd say they couldn't understand why they liked them so much. They couldn't put the finger on it, but they would constantly want to see them. And one great thing, I forgot to mention about the sailors. They have the boatswain's chair, and that would go. This one sailor told me he had visions when he got home. He was shell shocked, but he also had visions of seeing these old pictures go from one ship to his ship, over the rough seas, everything like that. He said, "You and Peggy Ryan were always coming over the horizon." And that's what they did. They used to transfer all these films, mine, everybody else's. We all made a string of them. I watched a film. Well, there's one on right now, I think, with Jane Powell and Wallace Beery, and that was another picture like those crazy pictures we made.
Did you end up in any of the pictures they put all the bands in?
Oh, yeah. That was Johnny Comes Marching Home. Harry James was in that. And I believe either that one or Give Out Sisters was the other one, which also had a war theme. Phil Spitalny and his all-girl orchestra. There was Bob Eberly, Harry James, Artie Shaw, right down the line.
They were all sort of just lifted out and put in as gigs, weren't they?
Right. Well, they had a small part. They had a couple of things to say throughout the picture, and that was about it. And they'd shoot them all in one day, or depending upon the budget. Then also Joey Lewis, the great comedian, was in, I believe, was either Give Out Sisters or Johnny Comes Marching Home. He did his nightclub act, also had a part in the picture, and he was just great. Just magnificent.
And was most of the musical material, was it written especially for the pictures, or was it pulled out of the studio's catalogues and put in?
No, most of it, well, if it was a big band era, then that was done. Like a big noise from Winnetka, naturally they would use it if it was a big record thing. Or in the band's repertoire. Then, of course, most of the stuff that we did later on, everything was written, it was all special material. Like Sidney Miller and Inez James, they were doing all of the early pictures with Peggy and myself. Maybe Johnny Mercer did, no, was it Frank Lesser who did Small Fry? I forget.
He did Frank
Pocket Full of Dreams and all that for Singing Sinners.
Yeah. Yes, his was Small.
And then Make 'Em Laugh, of course. That was done by Roger Edens and Arthur Freed.
Yes, that's interesting one to come to later, the writing of that, something I read this morning. Mr. Big was a fairly significant role for you. Was it
Yes.
your first really big role?
It was my second comeback. That really was the picture. And they Universal previewed the picture. I think it cost something like $175,000 to make. They previewed it. They saw it was a sleeper. We went back, worked on it for 2 more weeks, put in 16 more dance routines and songs. They put it out, and the total cost for prints and advertising, I think, was around $220,000. I think it grossed $8 million domestic first year it was out. So, and that's on a soft ticket. They're only getting, 30 cents, 40 cents a ticket then. So all those pictures I made with Peggy were just incredible. We made so much money, you don't believe it. J. Cheevers Cowden was a wonderful gentleman. He bought the studio for a write-off. And he used to walk around with me. He's a tall fellow, looked a great deal like the Commander Whitehead, the Schweppes, with a mustache, of stately British gentleman. And we'd walk around, and he said, "Donald, I don't know what I'm going to do." And I said, "What's the matter?" He said, "Well," he said, "I'm going to have to sell the studio. You're making too much money." He said, "Would you like to buy it?" And I said, "Sure." I was making a fast $25 a week then. Now, that's what we were talking about before. 50% went into trust, 25% went to my mother's bingo playing, and I got the other 25%. But I could have owned a studio for $2.5 million. That was the asking price for it at that time. Like what what I used to do. And it's a little come down for being a single-engine fighter pilot, because that's what I classified as at that time. And they disbanded that program. And there were 5 men out of 55,000 who qualified for aircrew training at that time. So I went into special service. And every time the venereal disease rate would go up in a town, they would call for me to go sing and dance. Can you imagine that? I was the greatest prophylactic that the service has ever had. I always knew where I was supposed to appear because there was a big octopus on one of those big billboards, and it said, "You are not immune." I knew that's where I was supposed to play.
Oh, how ridiculous.
Isn't that wild? And they had penicillin, too.
What then?
Yeah.
I bet they needed it. The studio, I was seeing that in 1 year, I think it was 44, you appeared in 6 films. Now, that is a hell of a lot of...
Well, actually, in 1 year, I made 12 pictures. When I was a kid, I made 13. That's the reason I made so damn many pictures. I got caught in a bind, or the studio did. I made 13 when I was a kid at Paramount, and I made 12 with Peggy and Gloria.
No, that just seems an inhuman amount of work to be doing.
It is. It's not like a Western, which you can grind out in about 7 or 8 days, because here you're working with music. You're working with dance numbers and so forth. And it takes time, and particularly with me, I'm a klutz. I never learned how to dance properly. I learned by sight and sound. And the other kids would pick up. They know all the basic steps. A shuffle ball change, and something or other. I still don't know them. And it takes me 2 or 3 times as long as anyone else to learn anything. And, of course, then I would be embarrassed. I would be holding everybody else up, and then it got even worse for me. Universal sent me to a great guy, Johnny Boyle, Sr. He was a great vaudeville actor, and also his son took over, and they had a dancing school. And for 2 weeks I was with him, and the Universal got a letter back, and they said I was unteachable. I still don't know the basic steps. A lot of steps I can't do. A military tap, that's one. It goes ba-ba-da-dum, ba-ba-dum, ba-ba-ba-bum. With either the right or left foot. I can't do it.
Load of myths and images.
Isn't that something? Yeah.
Shattered. Yeah. We're thinking of doing a bit of a program on Deanna Durbin. And you did one film with her.
Yes.
I mean, she was something of an enigma, really, because she suddenly, soon after that, disappeared totally off the screen, didn't she, and retired?
Yes.
What sort of a lady was she to work with? Have you any idea why she suddenly retired?
She was a good pro. She knew what she wanted, and she worked very, very hard. She was standoffish. I never really got to know her well, although she was wonderful to me whenever we worked or talked together. A lovely girl. I did notice, however, that they used to isolate us from the orchestra when we'd sing. They still do to this day, although I hate it, because I'd rather be right with the orchestra. But anyway, she would never allow anyone on the set. I call it a funk period, because we've all had them. And this particular time was her funk period. And we were in this isolation booth, and some people came in, some visitors, and she started to shake, and people couldn't see her or anything, but she saw them, and she started to shake like crazy. And I believe is one of the reasons that she quit. She just got to a point of whereby she got so uptight she couldn't take it anymore, and didn't want to. That's a difference between the two. You either want to or you don't. It's tough enough when you want to, and to get over that, because you can, and to work back into it again. But she obviously never really wanted to, because the instrument was there, that magnificent voice of hers, and great talent, beautiful charisma, everything. But obviously she didn't want to.
Was it a good film?
It was a fair picture. Again, I made an awful lot of money. And that was my first picture for Universal when I got out of service. But she was always nice to me and very open whenever we get together, but that was very infrequent. She was unhappy with the studio at that time, too, and well, I guess I don't know what else to say.
One other song I found in another film, coming after that, in Feuding, Fussing and the Fighting.
With Marjorie Main and Percy Kilbride. That was the kickoff, or they call it the spin-off today in television, of the Ma and Pa Kettle series.
Oh, really? Yeah.
That was the Feuding, Fussing and Fighting. The team, the pair, Percy Kilbride and Marjorie. That started them. They were tremendously successful with that series.
And was Sposen written for that, or was it just in
No, Sposen, I believe, was written in the 20s. Oh, and there's a crazy thing about that, too. You talk about destroying myths and ideas. I don't know if you recall or not, but the character that I played, I was supposed to be the fastest man in the world, fastest runner. And I came into this town. They have a rivalry with the next town. Like Bastille Day, everybody comes out and celebrates, and they do, kooky things. And they got me as a runner against this runner in the rival town, and they trained me like a racehorse. So where they have the cemetery now, that cemetery used to be a location area, and it was a beautiful, beautiful spot. And I was running and doing pratfalls, and I had a T-shirt on and short pants, and I had scratched myself so much I got poison oak. And in the meantime, when I was doing that scene, the girl I was working with, Penny Edwards, she was rehearsing, and she broke her collarbone. But they put her in a position so she could dance with her arm outstretched. You know how a woman would take you? Like that, with the elbow up and the whole thing. And the last scene of the picture, I'm wearing a wool suit and perspiring and scratching like crazy, and she's in a seersucker dress with a broken collarbone, her elbow sticking up, and I'm singing, "Suppose and I should fall in love with you." That's the whole thing with that song. Is that wild?
Oh, it's a beautiful.
Oh, it was miserable. Yeah, but I don't know if you'll ever see the picture again, but there she is with the broken arm stuck up in the air, and I'm waltzing with her and scratching. Every time I would turn my back to the camera, I'd scratch my belly or something. Oh, it was miserable.
Did you injure? I mean, it must have been a tragedy if you injured yourself ever.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, did it happen to you seriously at any stage that you did injure yourself during filming? And
yes, I did. I've hurt myself quite a few times. I used to do my own stunts, most of them anyway. And how I got the idea for Singing in the Rain for Make 'Em Laugh, my foot did go through a wall. And it was the worst picture that was ever made, called The Buccaneer or something, a pirate picture I made. It was terrible. But I guess the American public, they don't have too much taste, because it still made money. But I did put my foot through that wall, and luckily I didn't break my leg, but I did sprain my ankle when I came down, and that's where I got the idea to run through the wall. After I ran up the walls, did the back somersaults, and then I broke through the third wall for the finish of Make 'Em Laugh. Really, if you ever hurt yourself, you were knocked out of the box for an awful long time. And making Make 'Em Laugh, they had to shoot around me for 3 days because my body stiffened up from doing pratfalls on cement. I did that number twice in the picture.
Yeah, how long did it take to shoot those two routines? I mean, how many times did you have to go up a wall? How many times did you have to go through the wall?
I rehearsed it once. We shot it in sequence. I believe there were nine setups for that whole number after I leave the piano. And for each setup, I'd have to rehearse it once at least and do it. So I did that with the running up the wall. It was only twice. I ran through it once and did it. And what happened, Gene Kelly and Stanley Donen wanted more flat lighting like the Keystone Cops. So they got their flat lighting. And at that particular time, they were using 3 negatives to film. And they had fogged out all 3 negatives after I'd leave the piano and go into all the physical stuff. I looked like a ghost going across the screen. So I came hobbling in, and Gene asked me if I could do that number again. He liked it so much, and I said, sure, anytime. He said, well, wonderful, we have it scheduled for tomorrow. So I did it again. And I did it twice. Then they had to shoot around me again. I asked, I said, don't you have anything I can fall on? They brought me one of little oriental rugs
And what
that
about
wouldn't absorb a sponge.
and the going off the back of the settee as well?
Took me 4 weeks to get into shape to just do that one number. And the I wouldn't have taken that long, but what the problem was, by running up the wall, absorbing all of that weight on my legs, I was using muscles I had never used before, even though I'd been a tumbler, and top mounter and everything. Well, that was the reason for it. And it's interesting, I think, to how this number came about. I'm known for two things. One is the Make 'em Laugh number, and Top Man. We were talking about Top Man, getting the cherry out of the glass. The cherry was in the bottom of the glass, and there were 2 ice cubes on the top, and I couldn't get it out. Those are the 2 things I'm known for.
You're going to say the backgrounds will make them laugh.
Oh, yeah. Well, everyone is taking the credit for it now. Who put the number together? I don't know why it came about. Sometimes if you have a multifaceted person, now please, I'm not speaking of myself, but I was raised to do many, many things because people were nice enough to take the time with me to teach me how to do these things when I was growing up on circuses and in vaudeville. Like you find Mickey Rooney was the same way, or Judy, or anyone else. So sometimes you can be overwhelmed with the person's ability, what they can do. You say, well, we'll have them sing, we'll have them dance, and tell jokes and so forth. It'll be dramatic. And pretty soon you wind up with nothing because you don't know, you can't really put your finger on it and start to work. And that's what happened with me in Singing in the Rain. They had Debbie's numbers all already. Gene had the ideas for his ballet and so forth, and the big number at the end. And everybody else involved had their numbers. And they couldn't think of anything for me to do. And neither could I. I said, I have no idea. And we thought we were going to wind up by doing a number called Follow in My Footsteps. It's a 2-man thing. So Roger Edens came in and brought this number they had written with Arthur Freed, Make 'em Laugh. So Gene was busy on his ballet, and he gave it to me. He said, see what you can do with it. So I looked at the lyrics, and he said, well, you take Jeannie Coyne, who later on became Mrs. Kelly, and Carol Haney, who was a fantastic choreographer, a great talent. And he said, well, go in and see what you come up with. So I struck their funny bone. I'd say hello, and they'd fall down on the floor. Jeannie and Carol, I'm telling you. And the laugh, well, they had that beautiful laugh in their voices. So we went into the rehearsal hall, and with the pianist, I called up and I said, well, get me a lot of props, a bathtub without a bottom. And I just started fooling around with the number, and I started doing pratfalls. And whatever they laughed at the most, we wrote down. Then that crazy dummy was in this rehearsal hall to begin with. And I saw it had no head. There's a hunk of canvas there, really. And I took that thing and I started. It actually happened to me. A guy tried to pick me up on a subway going to Brooklyn once, and that's where I got the idea of the dummy trying to make me. Honestly, with the hand coming over on my knee, and I'd brush it away, and all that. Where a fight ensued, and that was it. And it turned out to be a crazy thing. So anyway, it was building to such a crescendo. I thought, this is what's going to happen. First time in the history of motion pictures, I will commit suicide right on the screen. That's the only way we can finish the number. That's when I got up the idea for running up the walls and so forth. And I went to Gene. He was looking at some sets, diagrams of sets. And I told him what the finish was. He said, wonderful. 2 weeks later, he came to me. He said, you have the finish? And I said, yeah, I told you. He said, I run up a wall, do a back somersault, and it's the same thing there. I go through the third one. He said, can you do it? I said, I don't know. I never tried. So I brought my brother Jack in. He put me in a harness, like you do on, your percherons, your horses on circuses, that type of harness. And so I learned the trick. And that's how that number came about. I think Kelly is now, since it's a smash again, he's taking all the credit for putting the number together. But it was a team effort, honestly.
It's difficult for him to justify that, because one of the questions I was going to ask you was about who choreographed it, because it is a slapstick dance routine, and I don't think he was particularly strong on that sort of
He wasn't.
out-and-out comedic dance routine. That wasn't his thing anyway.
No, but there again, you see, Kelly is a sucker for me because he also looks at me and he laughs. He falls down on the ground. And again, I say hello to him. He smiles and he breaks up. And we have a beautiful relationship like that. And that's what happened with the girls, too. And when I went in, actually, all I was doing, when I put I put the number together. But without them, I couldn't have. I really couldn't have. If I hadn't had a good audience while I was putting it together, the number would have never come about. Gene was terribly busy. He was not only preparing his ballet for American in Paris. I think he was working on that, but also going through the sets for this picture and working on his finale, the great finale number at the end, Broadway rhythm and everything. He was terribly, very, very busy.
How difficult was it to work with him? I mean, you said earlier that your dance training was not in any way formal.
No, yeah, this is a beauty. This is really a beauty. And I think it dawned on me because I was driving home from work, and Gene had stressed the fact that we were raised as children in the picture, raised as kids. Every movement that we do is exactly alike. We think alike, we walk alike, we talk alike. I said, wonderful. I was very impressed by that, but now I got scared to death driving home. I said, which way does he turn? Because I turn to the left. That's my strong side. I said, oh my heavens. I said, because only about 99% of your dancers turn to the left. And here we're supposed to be so close together, playing the violin with the other. I play the violin with my left hand. So I went to him. I just started to open my mouth the following day when we started to rehearse. And I said, which way do you, and he said the same thing at the same time. He asked me, which way do you turn? And I said, I turn to the left. He said, thank God, so do I. Gene also turns to the left. If he hadn't, I don't know what I would have done. But it was just fortunate that we both turned on the same side. And his feeling is that because you throw a baseball or a football or anything else, all of you're going on the right side, which means you start turning from there. And it's unnatural to go the other way, although Gene can do both. He's that well coordinated.
Was he, what sort of...
working with him?
Yeah,
he was miserable. No, we had a great time together, but man was under tremendous pressure at that particular time. Not only working very hard, as I said before, on that film, but also working on his other film, and trying to get his finishing number. And at that particular time, he had a short fuse, he would explode. One day, the classic story with him, I was always fooling around at the beginning. And then I'd calm down, we'd get to work. And there was an awful lot of work in that picture. So, and I'm deadly serious when I start to work, when I get into it. I don't smile or anything. I'm concentrating that much. So, one day I didn't feel well. We're doing Good Morning number with Debbie. And I said hello to everybody, and we went right into the number, and I'm going through, good morning, it's great to stay up late. And Gene said to me, he said, stop everything, take off the record. So I stopped, and he said, will you quit fooling around, Donald? I said, what? He said, will you cut out the clowning? He said, I've got a lot of work to do. I have a tremendous amount of pressure on my shoulders. I said, get down to business and learn it. I said, okay. I didn't know what the hell the guy's talking about. So the following day, we went out, Gene and Carol and Jeannie and all of us, we went over to have a drink after work. And we were talking, and Gene said to me, he apologized for bawling me out. And he said it wasn't because of you. He said it was because of Debbie. And he said if I had bawled her out, and he'd been having, he couldn't relate to her. And he was afraid of offending her. And pushing her to a point whereby he couldn't bring her back. And so he bawled me out instead. I said, you son of a gun. Well, little crazy things like that happen, but from then on, whenever he bawled me out or, look at me wrong, I'd say, I know what you... It was because of some grip that somebody else was doing something. Well, that's the type of relationship we had. And I was never offended by Gene. I love the guy too much.
I read this morning that Freed wanted Oscar Levant for your part, and that Kelly, Conlon and Green and Donham went to him and said they wanted you, and they won. Did you know anything about this?
No, I didn't. Not until you just mentioned it.
Well, whether or not it's true, I don't. There's a new book out by somebody called Hugh Fordin on sort of the MGM years. And it was
Isn't that
there.
something? Well, I don't think he could have run up the walls.
No,
I happen to be Oscar Levant. I happen to be his biggest fan.
They all said they wanted a, it's got to be a dancer. And they said, we want. But it's interesting because very often the people concerned don't know anything about that sort of thing, do they? You just either get the part or you don't.
That's correct.
Yeah.
They don't go in any depths.
But it was sort of. I mean, whether it's true or not, I think it's a.
I would say so. I think it would be true because Oscar had already made the inroads, making those pictures before, and it would seem to be a natural.
Yeah. Because I also read that you were saying what were you going to do with Make 'Em Laugh? There was something interesting that they went to. And it was the last composition that Arthur Freed and Nacio Herb Brown did together.
And they stole it from Cole Porter.
Well, that was the next thing I was coming to. Were you around the day that Irving Berlin came on the set and heard the song on playback?
No.
Because that's another story in that book, that he came on the set, and as soon as it started, he said, "That's Be a Clown." He said, "Who's stolen that? How dare they steal it?" And he went berserk.
Yeah.
And the book then went on to say that Cole Porter was just too much of a gentleman to
do anything
comment
about
on
it. Sure. See, because be a clown, all the world loves a clown. The other one is make 'em laugh, don't you know all the world wants to laugh. Well, how close can you get? It's true. But Arthur Freed and Berlin, they were all good pals, and Cole Porter. And it's true. Porter was not the type of fellow that would do anything about it.
It's a terrible steal, isn't it? Because I mean, it was from an MGM film anyway. It was from the pilot, I think, wasn't it?
Right. Both MGM and Arthur Freed did both of them.
Yeah.
Well, I don't care about where they got it. I'm just happy that I did it. I was real lucky.
Have you got any recollections of the Fit as a Fiddle routine?
Oh, sure. That's another time. We had worked so hard, and I think it was unheard of it at MGM, to do complete one dance routine in one day. As a matter of fact, we did it in 3/4 of a day and then started on this Fit as a Fiddle. And we were on the same set, so there wasn't that big a move to make with the cameras and everything. So they were set up in about 30 minutes, 40 minutes. We had finished this real tough number, Moses Supposes. Moses supposes his toes are roses, and Moses supposes erroneously. And it was a real toughie. We finished that thing. Started on Fit as a Fiddle and Ready for Love. I could jump over the moon above, Fit as a Fiddle and Ready for Love. And now we're being coordinating, playing the violins and all of that business. Now, I was getting awfully tired, and I didn't want to tell Gene. I wanted to hang in there as long as I could. Now I'm starting to drag. And Fit as a Fiddle is a real toughie to do. Very, very physical number. Oh, with all the knee bends and all the jumping up and down. So we started the number about the 10th time, Fit as a Fiddle and Ready for Love, and he stopped the number. He said, "Donald," he said, "let me see your bow." I showed him my bow. His bow was about 1.5 inches shorter than mine. And he says, "That's what's the matter. That's why I can't do this thing, for crying out loud." And he threw the thing down, went in his dressing room. Now, it's a stage, within a stage. Now the lights started to go off. I'm perspiring like crazy there, and I'm still holding my fiddle and the bow. I didn't know whether he's coming back, what he's going to do. I was worried about him, because he blew up. And so the lights went off, people started moving away, and I went over, knocked on his dressing room. And they said, "Who is it?" And I said, "It's Donald." He said, "Come on in." I walked in. Here he's got his legs up on the table, and he's with a big grin on his face. He said, I was tired. He didn't want to tell me. And I didn't want to tell him. He was beat, and so was I. He said, that's it. He said, how do you feel? I said, let's go relax and take it easy. I can't move. He said, wonderful. And we went out, and that was it. And we finished the number the following day.
That's a beautiful story.
It is, yeah.
What about Moses Supposes that you just...
You lived a lifetime in that one picture. It's true. It's true. Things that happened later on in years are attributable to that picture. Yeah. Incredible. Incredible.
What about Moses Supposes? That's difficult. That's difficult enough to in the first place, wasn't it?
Right. There are a lot of things. Again, Kelly and I, I put in a couple of steps there, but we were always going back and forth with dance routines. I can't think of anything in particular there. Oh, yes, there was one thing. Kelly had been striving all the time, as I told you before, of being absolutely precise and concise. Now, we are supposed to leap off the chairs. We're supposed to be the same height, fingers, everything. Their cuticles have to match. Now, as we jump off, I look up and I see Kelly about 2 feet above me. So I got down on the ground and I stopped. I said, what the hell were you doing up there? He says, I felt I had to let myself go. I said, well, you son of a gun, and I'm going to let myself go from now on, too. I said, you call your shots. But we went back. We were the same height after that and everything. But it was so funny, because I was up in the air about 5 feet when I looked over my shoulder, and here's Kelly up 2 feet above me. I looked up like this, and I came down on my feet. I couldn't believe it.
Did Gene Kelly and Stanley Donen think absolutely alike? I mean, who, if there was any choreographing to be done with you, who would do it? Stanley or Gene, or did they?
It was Gene that would come. I'm quite sure that he and Stanley, you have to have to co-direct. You have to think alike. You have to disagree alike, but come to your conclusion together. Otherwise, you can't work together. But Gene was the one that would come to us, and Stanley would work with Gene on the thing, map out ideas and choreography and what have you. Then Gene was the one who would come in and present it. I would say Gene a little bit more so because he was more in contact with us in the dancing. Although Stanley would come in and dance with us at times. Stanley's a hell of a dancer.
Would you like to say something on Stanley?
Yeah, Stanley was a magnificent. Oh, well, I'd say, I don't mean in the sense of being a mechanic. He was marvelous with camera, lighting, and general geography about the set and its people and what have you, and in numbers. But never too close to people. We get inside of them. And Gene was that way, too, in those early days. Never really... He wanted a performance. He wanted people to be there and be pros as they were, but never really went into any depth. He kind of stayed away from that. Then later on, they both mellowed, and then they became really the whole directors that they are today. But in those early days, they didn't. They couldn't quite do that. Now, I think it's because, number one, they didn't want to step on each other's toes. The other one was that they had a musical to do, and that's to get it out, and then a lot of work. They didn't have time for anything else.
Was there anything special about the MGM way of making musicals, the way they treated the properties, the way they treated the people?
Yeah, their emphasis was on a grandiose scale, bigness. That was their forte. There's a great story of Busby Berkeley when he was doing a picture with Judy. This one number with Judy Garland. Mr. FDR Jones. And of course, Buzz always wants bigness, anything gigantic. And Buzz, you've got to meet someday, if you haven't already. He's a magnificent person, great intuitive sense of humor. And he had his finder, and he had 4 guys, and he'd be looking in the finder like this. And he was using that one stage that, in Singing in the Rain, that Gene Kelly did with Debbie Reynolds. You Were Meant for Me. It's a gigantic stage. It looked like a dirigible was built in there. And so Buzz now starts her Judy singing, and he starts back with these 3 guys holding him by the arms. And he says, keep on going back, back, back. And he got to the back of the wall, which must have been 300 yards away. And he said, he looked around, he said, knock that out. He knocked the wall out so he could go back farther. And then they built an elevator so he could go up. But that is the idea, and they let him go. That was the marvelous thing about MGM Pictures. They let their people create and to work. And they used to argue a great deal, but they let either the performer, director, work. They let them have the way.
Good climate, really.
That really is
Yeah.
true. The difference between doing musicals at Universal and MGM is the fact I did 2 numbers in one day and never rehearsed the one number I did after lunch.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Coming forward, Call Me Madam with Ethel Merman. Now, she's a bit of an enigma, really, because she never made it as a film star, an enormous Broadway name. She never really seemed to come off terribly well in films.
Well, again, you see, when we made Call Me Madam and No Business Like Show Business, they made an awful lot of money for the studios. And of course, you must remember, Ethel has been around for an awful long time in motion pictures. A lot of people forget that. As a matter of fact, when I say we made the remake of Anything Goes, she did the original with Crosby.
But she always seems to be remembered as a Broadway...
As a Broadway star,
As a
yes.
Broadway star.
Well, it's true, because she is the first lady of Broadway. No one else has ever done the things that she has. And it's very true, although she was highly successful in motion pictures.
Did Berlin show himself during the making of either of the films?
Oh, yes, yes. Irving is incredible. I put him on something terrible on No Business Like Show Business. It came up with A Man Chases a Girl. A man chases a girl until she catches him. That one. After I kiss Marilyn Monroe goodnight, then I go into this fantasy dance. And Irving tried to sell me this song, and he's like a little kid, no matter, with this great mind of his and being so successful. Everything he writes, it's like he's never been heard of before. So he tried to sell me this song, and I said, well, Irving, I'm not quite sure about this thing. It was done in Louisiana Purchase. It was just taken from that and put in this picture. And I said, I'm not sure about it for me. And he said, Donald, you don't understand. You got to get in there and do this number. It'll be great for you. It'll be just perfect. He said, let me play it for you. And I had him play it over and over again, the days after, on his piano, you know, the one with the key that changes. So finally I told him I was putting him on, and I said, let me show you what the number looks like. And I brought him into our set. And I did the whole dance for him, and he flipped, and he laughed his head off. He thought that was the funniest thing that ever happened. And to show his gratitude, this was so nice of him. When I write with Sidney Miller, when I write songs and so forth, whenever we get together to write, he writes in 5 flats. So Berlin's pianos, he can transpose the keys by pressing the middle pedal, and he has a lever. So he can still play on the black keys, black things, and change. So he gave me one of his pianos.
Really?
So I have one. Yeah, there are only 3 left. I have one. And it's very funny, too, because he was doing something with Arthur Freed a couple of years ago, and he called me and asked me if he could borrow his piano. And they sent over a truck, and then he did his work, and then he sent it back.
Oh, incredible.
Yeah.
What was it? Did he have particular ideas on how he wanted his material sung?
No. Just with the amount of enthusiasm that he put into it himself, and the amount of work that he took. That's all he ever wanted. He never directed you, told you how to do it, or anything like that. It was, you were on your own. If you could do the song, yeah, that was it. You had his full approval.
Any of the songs and routines in Call Me Madam that we might have something on? It's a lovely day today.
That, I think, is one of the prettiest numbers that's ever been on the screen. It was Vera Ellen. That is a magnificent, really a magnificent number. And unfortunately, you don't see it on the television, which bugs me, too, about TV. If you see Singing in the Rain, you won't see Moses Supposes, you won't see my Make 'Em Laugh, and you won't see Fit as a Fiddle. You won't see Debbie Reynolds' opening number, and you won't see Gene Kelly and myself as kids growing up. So you're seeing a bastardized version of the picture. The same thing happened in Call Me Madam. I think one of the finest numbers, certainly fastest number that's ever been done on the screen, is with Vera Ellen and myself in the wine cellar when we first meet. It is a beautifully choreographed number. I think it's one of the finest numbers that Bob Walton ever did. And that's out of the picture. And also, you know, those tricky little things I try to come up with, like Make 'Em Laugh. I had my balloon dance, that Irving Berlin did. Look at what it did to Anthony. What chance have I with love? And it was a balloon dance. It was tricky and it was funny, and that's out of the picture.
That was deleted before.
That's deleted also.
Because I realised I Can Make You Laugh was deleted before
Right.
release, wasn't it?
Right.
Yeah. That must be vaguely depressing. You spend time and trouble getting a routine together.
Yes, it is, and it doesn't prove too much sanity or ability with the people that cut it out, because these pictures are predicated upon their numbers and not upon the dialogue. The dialogue really is just a gap between numbers, and these people, I don't know. It is incredible. I have always had an suspicion, rather, that the people that cut it, it's in their living room because they like the numbers so much. Because certainly anybody in their right mind wouldn't take a number out of a picture that is historically great. Can be, considered one of the greatest numbers in motion picture annals.
That's incredible, isn't it?
It is. You can these guys are out of their bird.
What about you, Just
Or
in
women,
Love?
whoever they are, huh?
What about your Just in Love? Because that was a super song.
Oh, yeah, a crazy thing happened with Ethel and myself. But we've been pals for an awful long time. And I like to work with the audience, with the orchestra, rather. And they put up our microphones on the stage, and Arthur Newman was directing the orchestra. And Ethel was right next to me, and I did the first part, which is slow. I hear singing and there's no one there. I did the first part, then she comes in, you don't need analyzing. And my ears started to vibrate, so I moved away about 6 feet. That didn't work either. I wound up in the isolation booth, and she wound up on the stage. I couldn't sing next to her. My ears would just go. That's what happened on that thing.
It was Berlin, I think. We've got Berlin on tape, which was recorded years ago before he became a recluse, saying it's got to be good to have Ethel Merman in one of your musicals, because if she's playing in New York, you can hear the songs in London.
That's marvelous. That's great.
What was it like working with Marilyn Monroe? Did you find?
There again, she was very much like Diana Durbin. Very much like her, but not quite as... well, she wouldn't get that nervous. But she was a wonderful girl. Everyone has their little quirks and things about them, and I think hers was getting on the set. Because it's like going out sometimes. I don't know if you ever find yourself, but I find myself holding back a little bit. It's either because I don't want to go, or I just can't get up enough energy to really get going. And that's very much like it was with Marilyn when before a scene, or each day of shooting, I'd say. Usually start in the morning, but the first time she'd be a little late. And that's only because she couldn't get there. And that's all it was. Once she was there, she knew her lines. She was letter perfect, worked like a Trojan, very hard. And she was great, and a lot of fun.
She nudged at the edge of a musical career in a funny way, didn't she?
Yeah.
She sort of, and she probably could have been very, very good if that had been pushed a little bit.
I think what they could have done, I think not only saving her life, I think they could have helped her out a great deal in her career. If they had let her, she wanted to do Anna Karenina. If they had let her had done that, even if it was a bomb, so what? It ain't going to lose that much money. Because she was right at the pinnacle of her career at that time. And she wanted to do serious things. If she could have seen herself in that thing, and if she wasn't any good, then she wouldn't have bothered with it again, because she was too smart for that. She was too good a businesswoman. You wouldn't have let her interfere with it. But she became emotionally involved in this kick, and besides the other things that were happening to her privately at that time, it became insurmountable.
What was the intention behind making a remake of Anything Goes? Did you know? Why they wanted to remake it?
I think because they had the property and they didn't have anything else to do at the time. I think that's the only justification for it.
Was Porter around at the time that it was made?
Yes, he was, but he never came over on the set or anything. I did see him later on. I think I showed you that picture with Marilyn Monroe and Cole Porter and myself at the Coconut Grove. But he never came over on the set.
Because most of your material for the film was written by Carmen Van Heusen, wasn't it?
Isn't that something? Yeah. That's why. Or Sidney Miller and Inez James. and Buddy Pepper. Frank Lesser and Johnny Mercer.
It was ridiculous. What was Secondhand Turban and Crystal Ball? Because I didn't see that really.
That's in Top Man.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a crazy Arabian Nights type of thing. I broke my wrist in that picture. I fell back on the pillows and I hit one wrong and went in between the pillows and I hit the floor, trying to pad myself. Doing a silly little thing like that. Here I could fall off a brick wall and nothing would happen. Well, that's a Secondhand Turban and Crystal Ball. That was in that picture. It was a throwaway number, a pretty rotten number.
Is the musical dead now, do you think?
No, I don't think so. It is dead the way we used to make them. Or if they can find ideas like Singing in the Rain, they can come back with things. The accent later on, outside of the frothy type of musicals that I made, they started having a strong book with the score. And they were integrated that way. West Side Story was the forerunner. And I think Music Man is a great another example. And Sound of Music certainly is one of the finest that was ever made. That type of thing come back. And even if they can come up with stories like Singing in the Rain where it has to do with a picture in a picture, the creation of all of that is that timeliness. Yeah, if they can think in those terms, it would be great.
Because people seem to have all sorts of excuses for why it can never come back.
I know vaudeville will never come back per se, the way it was. So I'm not hung up on that, But musicals still have a place in this world. People want to see them, but they've always been a calculated risk, and studios aren't about to go out and make those kind of things anymore.
Just one last thing, which was an afterthought, really. Is it particularly difficult to do comedy in films at all, but especially in musical films? I mean, if we think back, if you like, to make them laugh, you had to rely on a couple of people to show you or help you realize what might be funny to an audience. But it seems to me you're going an awful long way out on a limb with any comedic musical routine. Is it particularly difficult? Were you conscious of it being difficult?
Well, no, not so, because not so much, I'll say, because of the fact that being raised in vaudeville and hearing an audience laugh at a joke, if you find something which is inherently funny, then you'll tell it that way and you'll automatically pause and make it up in some other way by going for a cup of coffee or something, so you don't see a big gap in there. You'll find that with any of your great comedians like Benny or any of them.
In general, how successfully do Broadway comedies translate into Hollywood films?
The Hollywood ego gets in the way. They translate from the stage to Hollywood. They change everything. And it's not, if a joke goes in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, the joke is going to go on the screen. But most producers can't see this. They're not musically oriented. That's the reason why you find so many Broadway plays go down the tube when they're translated onto the screen. The Hollywood interference, I call it. The other thing, too, for instance, like Call Me Madam, was not that good a play. When Fox did it, the picture was much better than the play. It turned out that way. Now, that's an exception to the rule. The other thing, too, if you remember now, Singing in the Rain, The Pirate, all of these pictures were made by Arthur Freed and Roger Eden. They were in the business of music. And very few people on the outside, you can't be a spectator and go to a musical and like it, and if you're out of that field, you can't produce one. You can't direct one. It's out of your bag, unless you happen to be a multifaceted person, which Hollywood does not have that many. Another thing, too, they've always been a calculated risk, and people like to play it safe here. They don't want their jobs jeopardized, and that's not like it was in the old days. People didn't run so scared, which is another interesting thing, too. It might be a little off the track, but earlier, we used to make a lot of mistakes. But like in life, it's the ability to make mistakes that builds, a character, builds us for what we are. If we can't make mistakes, then we better, just pull the box over us.
Is there any particular individual who has perhaps contributed more to the evolution of the musical than anybody else? Or is there any particular event, significant happening?
No. That is a very difficult thing to say because in pictures, you have to start with the jazz singers. Jazz singer and pictures before that, picture that Universal made, I think was the first musical really was ever made, complete, was Broadway, Universal Pictures made. I think they all contributed to one another. I think as far as your D.W. Griffiths, as far as music is concerned, is Busby Berkeley. I think he was the forerunner of all of them. I think it was a team effort again, because they're shooting all the girls doing in the swimming pools and all of that stuff. Buzz did that, and so many other people. The real great breakthrough, I think, was the fact that they made one, and that it could be done.